of his glove in close quarters.
Who bitterly opposed him, wanted to send a delegation to the National Democratic Convention, pledged to support the nominee of the Democratic Party, no matter who he might be. This fight in the Democratic Party created a great deal more interest, of course, because there are more Democrats and more publicity than our Republican precinct conventions. And any Democrat would, of course, attend his Democratic precinct convention because of his natural interest in that fight, which was bitter and prolonged, and he would likewise stay away from the Republican precinct convention not only because of his interest in his own party squabble, but because it's against the law and a criminal offense for him to participate in both conventions.
Mr. Cecil.
Chairman, may I ask?
I recognize first the gentleman.
Chairman, I'd like to ask the same gentleman a question. My name is William Stern, and I'm from North Dakota. Mr. Cecil, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever attended a Republican convention prior to the last convention that you attended?
No, sir.
Chairman,
Gentlemen,
may I ask?
let's have order, please. The gentleman.
Them from Connecticut.
Yes. Gentleman from Connecticut.
Mr. Cecil, this credentials committee that was appointed... I guess they can hear me. This credentials committee that was appointed to pass upon the delegates to the state convention and threw out, as you say, arbitrarily 500 of your delegates. Will you tell us whether your group were represented on that committee? The State Executive Committee, the Credentials Committee that passed upon the credentials of the delegates to the convention, was your group represented on that committee?
Well, upon that committee, there were some people who favored the candidacy of General Eisenhower, but the overwhelming majority of the group were dominated and controlled by the Zweifel faction and their consistent vote in throwing out all Eisenhower contested delegates with monotonous regularity and with practically the same vote demonstrated, of course, Mr. Zweifel's absolute control of that committee. Now, I want to elaborate 1 second on the question this gentleman asked.
Wait a minute. Wake up. I have one further question. Mr. Chairman, I have one further question. At the hearing before the National Committee, I believe either you or some of the attorneys associated with you stated that 2 members of the Zweifel delegation seated here today neither signed the pledge, but they are reputed to be Democrats. Can you tell us how that came about?
I don't know of my own knowledge whether they signed the declaration or not. I know they've been Democrats, and I wouldn't say they're not now Republicans if they've complied with the requirements of the Republican Party. But if they are Republicans, they're not they're not members of the Republican Party as long as I've been. Although I haven't been to many conventions, the Republican Party saw fit to nominate me for Congress from Texas in 1944, and I ran the race and lost it, with no help from Mr. Zweifel.
The gentleman from Nevada is recognized for question. Delegate from Nevada, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Cecil, I would like to ask you a question or two. First, how is the Executive Committee in the state of Texas formed? How is it elected?
I would prefer to have questions as to the internal construction of this committee answered by Mr. McCorkadale or Mr. Lane, who have given it a great deal of study. I know the answer, but I think they know it better than I.
The State Executive Committee is elected every 2 years. The party has been a small exclusive patronage club. The same group has been re-elected and re-elected, and they have formed an affiliation among themselves, and they went into this campaign with a pledge among themselves that they were going to perpetuate themselves.
When was the present executive committee elected?
In August 1950.
Was it in an open primary?
It was through conventions.
Through conventions or
Yes,
primaries?
conventions. We don't have primaries in Texas in the Republican Party.
In 1950, when this present convention or executive committee was elected, nobody knew whether General Eisenhower was going to run as a Democrat or a Republican. In view of that, would Mr. Cecil explain how he figures this was a hand-picked, sorted over executive committee for the purpose of the present controversy?
Well, I didn't say that. I say it's a hand-picked, sorted over Republican Executive Committee under the exclusive domination of Henry Zweifel and a few of his cohorts. I further say that Mr. Zweifel wants Miss Senator Taft nominated. And when it became apparent to him that the Texas Republicans didn't agree with it, he deliberately rigged these bolts so he would throw these contests before his dominated committee, and it resulted in 500 Eisenhower delegates being thrown out of 722. He didn't know about Taft and Eisenhower then, but when he made up his mind who he was for, he saw to it that the Eisenhower delegates didn't get seated.
When did Mr. Zweifel become national committeeman?
Following the death of Mr. Krager, I don't know the year. I never have kept up with Mr. Zweifel too closely.
Let's have order in the committee, and the questions, I hope, will be
He made national
in order and the
committeeman
answers in order.
before or after this convention that elected the present executive committee.
Oh, he was national committee man before then. Well, I may be in.
Is there, you wish to correct that or check on it?
I will ask one of my associates to answer it if I am in error.
At the Republican State Convention in August 1950, Colonel Krager was apparently in bad health. At that time, Mr. Zweifel made his plans to get the State Executive Committee behind him, and when Colonel Krager died a few months later, why, his plans went into fruition and he was elected national committee.
You have proof of the statement as to the plan.
Well, I know that they talked it up among themselves and it was all set. Mr. Nolte announced it right after Colonel Krager's death.
Are there other questions from the committee?
This is Miles Draper of Florida. Mr. Ahrens has asked most of the questions which I had intended to ask. As you all know, I am a great believer in the state committee. Mr. Cecil or Mr. Lane, either one of you can answer this question. When will your state committee members be up for re-election?
The July conventions will be held and they will be the basis of the next election of the state committee.
In July of this year?
July of this year.
Did your group run candidates for membership on a state committee 2 years ago?
We had no particular fight among ourselves. At that time, why, Mr. Bill Luce and Mrs. Roberts of Dallas and I and all of our Dallas group were together. I had been for Taft. I was a delegate for Taft in 1948. And I didn't change it until January of this year when I didn't think he could be elected.
Do you intend to run candidates for the state committee in the conventions this year from your group, as opposed to Mr. Zweifel's candidates?
We will probably run some candidates.
Okay.
Gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Emerson, is recognized. I don't know about that. Let me get up. No, it's up here. That's, I think, for other purposes.
Mr. Watson, who received the official call for the 1952 convention? the two members of the National Committee from Texas? Who were they? Mr. Henry Zweifel and Mrs. Carl G. Starnes.
Mr. Watson, what is your official position in connection with the party?
I am a member and secretary of the State Executive Committee.
How many districts in Texas were there in which no contests were filed in this proceeding?
I don't have it fixed. Yes, I do. There were 8 districts with 11 delegates, but there were no contests from any county.
You've answered my next question here. How many delegates to this convention were elected from the non-contested districts?
11
11
delegates, yes.
Was there any contested districts where the outcome of the contest would not have affected the result?
I know of 2 districts. One was my own in the 15th district. It was one county contested, and even giving the Eisenhower people that county, well, the district would have still gone for Taft in the caucus, even if they had stayed there in the convention. There's one other district. Find it right here for you, sir. The 11th district, there was one county there, 10, in which there was a contest, but even giving them that 10, we would have still have controlled that district in the caucus.
That is, it would not have changed the result to
Yes,
give
sir.
effect
That's
to all the
correct.
contests
That's
in
correct.
these districts you have mentioned.
That's correct, sir.
How many delegates were elected to this convention from these districts? All of these districts now we've discussed.
11, 13, 14.
That's all.
The gentleman recognized.
Mr. Watson, let me have the name of the chairman of the State Executive Committee of Texas.
Mr. Orville Bullington of Wichita Falls.
Was he chairman in the meeting of Fort Worth, Texas, I believe in February?
Yes, sir, he was.
Did he attend that meeting?
Yes, sir, he presided at that meeting. I was the secretary.
What did he say in reference to this pledge, which we've heard so much about in the last 2 days?
I can't quote his exact words because I was busy there, but he made some explanation similar to the letter which was brought up here by the other people this morning, which they quoted, but did not read the entire letter, so the full sense could have been gotten from it.
Well, you read...
Request has been made that you state your name and state.
I am Bob Kay from West Virginia. Would you read the full text of that letter or the pertinent parts of it with reference to this pledge? Because I want to ask you another
Yes, I
question in
will.
connection with it.
I think this, in fairness, I'm quoting now from the brief of the Porter delegation. And this is their, what they have, this excerpt is theirs. Anyone who knows what a pledge is, or who can read the English language, would know that the resolution that was passed by the Republican State Executive Committee is in no sense a pledge. If a man is not a Republican, he has no right to participate in the Republican precinct conventions. And if he is not a Democrat, he has no right to participate in the Democratic precinct conventions and nominate candidates for the presidency. I think that's the part they left out this morning.
Was there, when the State Committee met to formulate the basis for the qualifications as set up by the State Committee, was there a vote on the qualifications for voters, the pledge?
Do I understand you to me in this declaration that we adopted and the instructions about to the precinct chairman with reference to enforce that? Is that what you mean?
That's what I want to find out, whether that was a action of the state committee as distinguished from the action of the chairman by himself.
It was presented in the form of a resolution, which I read. The resolution included this declaration: I am a Republican and desire to participate in Republican Party activities in the year 1952. That resolution also included instructions to the precinct chairman that no voter was to be allowed to participate in the precinct conventions until he had signed that. When the resolution was presented, Mr. Porter spoke against the resolution and made the statement that if it was adopted, that the Democrats could not come into the precinct conventions. The vote was taken after some discussion from several others there, and the vote was 53-9 for the resolution. 53-6, I beg your pardon. 59 total.
In other words, the opposition spoke against that qualification for persons participating in the Republican caucus meeting at the precinct level.
Yes, sir.
Are there other questions from the committee? I recognize the
Chairman.
gentleman, Mr. I recognize the gentleman. I've been recognizing on this side of the aisle because there has been no response.
I would like to rise to a point of personal privilege for Mr. Porter on that matter.
I have to say to the gentleman, of course, that it would have to be by unanimous consent of everybody. I'm afraid not a member of the committee. You understand that, I think.
Mr. Chairman, there is one further question I'd like to ask to just make certain I'm correctly informed.
Mr. Boyd of New Hampshire has a question. Is that right? And who do you want to direct it to, Congressman?
Mr. Cecil, am I correctly informed that there is no registration law in Texas covering any political party registration such as we have in many states, and that in Texas a former Democrat officially becomes a Republican the minute he signs the prescribed declaration? Is that correct?
There is no registration statute in Texas, no registration requirement. When a person who has been a Democrat or an independent signs the declaration required by the Republican Party, which is the sole test laid down by that party, it has a right to make requirements for admission. It having made the requirement, when a party signs it, he is a Republican. The only time that that can be challenged is upon positive proof that that individual signed it with a fraudulent intent. And in this case, there has been no proof of any individual out of the 75,000 who voted having signed the declaration required by the party in bad faith. The presumption in law under all of the authority is that he signed it in good faith, and it cannot be questioned.
The gentleman from Virginia desires to propound a question to who? Well, Cecil, do you?
Gene Worrell from Virginia. Mr. Cecil, this is to clarify what to me is still somewhat confused. Do I understand that of all of the counties of Texas, that the Zweifel forces carried county mass meetings in 207 of those counties? Is that a correct statement?
No, sir, I don't think it is. The fact of the matter is, in the 5 largest counties in Texas, which have some 356 out of the...
I didn't ask that, sir. I said of the counties in Texas. How many counties are there in Texas?
254.
Now, of the 254 counties, how many of the county mass meetings do you allege were illegally held? In other words, how many counties are in contest?
Well, we haven't alleged that any of them were illegally held. It's the opposition who alleges they were illegally held. They're the ones created the bolts in the counties that we won and threw the issue before the Republican Executive Committee. We didn't contest any Taft people.
In an effort, sir, to get an answer in the spirit in which I'm asking it, purely to clarify what is in contest. As I understand it, there are 31 contests filed. Is that right?
I think so.
Now, do those 31 contests represent county mass meetings held for that purpose? In other words, are the delegates in contest elected at county mass meetings in 31 counties?
In county precinct convention.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, that would leave 217 instead of 207 counties on which there is no contest. Is that correct?
Mathematically, yes.
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking, sir. In other words, we have 217 counties where precinct mass meetings were held that are not in contest. We have 31 counties where contests are involved. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
But, I have a right to answer the question.
I don't want to be given the privilege to answer the question.
There's a vast difference between counties, numerically or mathematically, and delegate strength. Newton County, Texas has 1 delegate. Harris County, Texas has 144. Of course, Mr. Zweifel didn't contest of both Newton County with 1 vote. He picked out Dallas, Houston, Tarrant, and Travis County, the counties that had all the delegate strength.
May I follow that then, with the chair's permission, with one further question?
One more question.
In the convention, in the convention of the state of Texas, if a rule had been adopted, like we adopted at this convention with the sponsorship of the Eisenhower Forces, that no delegate could sit in judgment of himself. Let's suppose all of the delegates represented in the...
So while the Texas fight goes on in the Credentials Committee, you can see on our monitor over there, down on the floor of the convention on the monitor right behind us here, they have just introduced Senator Joseph McCarthy. He's getting quite an ovation from the crowd at the convention, the Republican National Convention, and he's about to address this meeting. Quite a few more people there on the floor, as you can see, than have been there all morning. Let's switch down to the convention floor.
There's no audio.
Good. Good. Can't use most of them.
I tell you to talk straight between the 2 mics here.
Good.
delegates, please be seated.
Thank you, Walter Hellman, and thank you, fellow Americans. Thank you very much for the privilege of discussing with you this afternoon the great overshadowing evil which is the issue of 1952. That issue, or that question is, shall America continue to squander her blood, waste her resources, and sacrifice her position of world leadership? Now, this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This, my good friends, is an American issue. Now, as we approach the all-important November elections, all Americans, Democrats and Republicans alike, must keep in mind the facts as they are and not the facts as we would wish them to be, even though those facts may be raw and harsh. Fact number one, we are at war today, war in Korea, but the Korean War is merely a small phase of the great world war with atheistic communism. Fact number two, for the past 7 years, we have been losing that world war at the rate of nearly 100 million people a year. Not 100,000, but losing 100 million people a year to atheistic communism. And fact number three, today on July 9, 1952, the same man who delivered nearly half of the world to communist Russia are still in control in Washington. There's been no change. The same men are doing your planning. The same planners who had control before 1945. 1945, when we were the most powerful nation on earth. 1945, when all we needed with our unlimited military and economic power, was enough brains, enough honesty, enough loyalty to have restored a decent and peaceful world. But what happened? Instead, we allowed communism to spread its dark shadow over half of Europe and almost all of Asia. And for the first time, they're appearing on the pages of America's history. Words such as stalemate, retreat, compromise. Well, Truman says that the Democrat Party must run on its record. To that I say amen, so they must. Let's briefly glance at that record. On foreign policy, they have given us 2 planks and 2 planks alone. Number 1, fear, and number 2, war.
Yes, I give you a reading. I think you see.
As we all know, at war's end, our foreign policy, if we can call it that, our foreign policy was to tear down America's might and build up Russia. We put torches to our airplanes. We destroyed in Europe the equipment for 60 divisions. We dumped into the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans hundreds of thousands of tons of ammunition and military equipment. Nothing secret about this. It's all a matter of cold record before congressional committees. We dissipated our strength, dissipated it despite the warnings of our great veterans organizations. We decimated our army in a matter of months. Now, why, ladies and gentlemen, why has this administration deliberately built up Russia while tearing down the strength of America? Now, I have been proving that it was because of a combination of abysmal stupidity and treason. If I am wrong, if no treason is involved, if the last traitor left with Alger Hiss, then the only answer for our loss and for Russia's gain is that those in power are guilty of stumbling, fumbling incompetence. But in either event, whether we are losing because of treason or because of stupidity, if America and her sons are to live, then that Yalta, Tehran, Potsdam crowd must go, my good friends. I have enough faith in America to feel they will go on November 4, 1952. Now, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to uncover those who would betray America? Why must we have a Republican president and a Republican Congress to get rid of those who are found at every time and place? Those who are found at every time and place when disaster comes to America and success comes to communist Russia. Well, I think perhaps I have part of the answer to that in my hand. I hold in my hand the testimony of a great American before the McCarran Committee, before a great committee. This is the testimony of General Willoughby, who for about 10 years was head of the intelligence department of the greatest American, I think, who was ever born, Douglas MacArthur. Just listen to this, if you will, this testimony under oath before a congressional committee of one of our top intelligence experts. He was being asked, for the benefit of the press, this is August 9, 1951, page number 744. He was being asked about some of those unusual individuals in the State Department. Listen to this answer. He says, Mr. Chairman, as a citizen, I am most anxious to assist this important committee. He says, however, as a federal officer, I am expected to obey Army orders and presidential directives. The question, read the presidential directive. Listen to this, if you will. Here's the presidential order to the head of the intelligence section. You shall give no information of any sort relating to any federal employee's loyalty or his communistic activities to any congressional committee. Then he was asked to read the Army directive, and here it is. Any individual who may appear as a witness before a congressional committee will respectfully decline to testify concerning the loyalty of any person, and will state that he is forbidden to answer such questions by pertinent directives of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone in this hall tonight, or is there anyone in our radio or television audience But in either event, whether we are losing because of treason or because of stupidity, if America and her sons are to live, then that Yalta, Tehran, Potsdam crowd must go, my good friends. I have enough faith in America to feel they will go on November 4, 1952. Now, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to uncover those who would betray America? Why must we have a Republican president and a Republican Congress to get rid of those who are found at every time and place? Those who are found at every time and place when disaster comes to America and success comes to communist Russia. Well, I think perhaps I have part of the answer to that in my hand. I hold in my hand the testimony of a great American before the McCarran Committee, before a great committee. This is the testimony of General Willoughby, who for about 10 years was head of the intelligence department of the greatest American, I think, who was ever born, Douglas MacArthur. Just listen to this, if you will, this testimony under oath before a congressional committee of one of our top intelligence experts. He was being asked, for the benefit of the press, this is August 9, 1951, page number 744. He was being asked about some of those unusual individuals in the State Department. Listen to this answer. He says, Mr. Chairman, as a citizen, I am most anxious to assist this important committee. He says, however, as a federal officer, I am expected to obey Army orders and presidential directives. The question, read the presidential directive. Listen to this, if you will. Here's the presidential order to the head of the intelligence section. You shall give no information of any sort relating to any federal employee's loyalty or his communistic activities to any congressional committee. Then he was asked to read the Army directive, and here it is. Any individual who may appear as a witness before a congressional committee will respectfully decline to testify concerning the loyalty of any person, and will state that he is forbidden to answer such questions by pertinent directives of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone in this hall tonight, or is there anyone in our radio or television audience, who can tell you why the President and the Secretary of Defense, why they say it's a crime not to betray this nation, but a crime to expose those who are betraying this nation? Now this fight, this task of taking down from the watchtowers of this nation, those who have been so bad for America, should not be a fight between America's two great political parties. Certainly the millions of Americans who have long voted the Democrat ticket are just as loyal. Certainly they love America just as much as the average Republican. Certainly they hate communism just as much as the average Republican. But unfortunately, those loyal Democrats of this nation no longer have a party in Washington. And I don't ask those loyal Democrats to desert their party. I merely ask them to look at the cold record and find out that their party has deserted them. And I'd like to call upon those millions of Democrats today to scrub and flush and wash clean this government by voting the Republican ticket this fall. Now in this fight, some of my good friends have accused me of being too rough. To them I say, there is no common sense limit. There is a common sense limit to gentleness and delicacy. That limit is where disloyalty and treason begin, where organized deceit and godlessness begin. If we are to win this fight, my good friends, if we are to win this fight, we must use all of the intelligence, all of the courage, all of the skill, every effort of mind and body. And if, as is obviously the case, a rough fight is the only fight the communists can understand, then the Republican Party will give them a rough fight. Even though it might be less unpleasant to do it another way, we can't fight communists. We can't fight communists in the Atchison Lattimore fashion of hitting them with perfumed silk handkerchiefs at the front door while they batter our friends with brass knuckles and blackjacks at the back door. It can't be done that way. And I say,
The fish are painted red, supposed to represent the red herring that President Truman is saying, was being drawn across the path of communist investigations. The speaker, of course, is Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin.
One communist. One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many. And even if there were only one communist in the State Department, even if there were only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many. Now our job as Americans and as Republicans is to dislodge the traitors from every place where they've been sent to do their traitorous work. Now you, the American people, 155 million American people, have given the administration Democrats the task of manning the watchtowers of this nation for 20 years. You have given them every cent of money they have asked for and more. You, the American people, have given them power surpassed only by an absolute dictatorship. And during that 20 years, America has fought one world war, and in the Korean War, which of course according to Truman is not a war, they have squandered, I repeat, they have squandered the blood of 110,631 sons of American mothers. They have increased the debt of this nation from $23 billion to $257 billion. They have made dishonesty, graft, corruption, and immorality the rule and not the exception. Now, on November 4, if this nation is to live, then the American people must say, we are through with the Trumans, the Atchisons, the Latimores, and the Jessups. America must say to them, make an account of thy stewardship, for thou canst be steward no longer. Make an accounting of Korea. Well, of course, the Atchison, Truman, Latimore party, they'll say, oh, but this is a limited war in Korea. Yes, it's limited, my friends. Limited to the area to which the communists wanted limited. Limited as to honor, unlimited as to dishonor, unlimited as to the amount of blood and agony and tears that they have squandered and will squander if they're left in power. Unlimited as to the number of American mothers and wives whom they are sending so deep into the valley of darkness and despair. Now this afternoon, on July 9, 1952, let me cite to you, if I may, one of the most incredibly fantastic orders that has ever been issued or left in existence in war or peacetime. Nothing secret about it. An order that is in existence as of this very moment. It is an order to our 7th Fleet. Listen to this, if you will. Listen to this, if you will. An order to our 7th Fleet, an order in existence as of this moment, in order to kill, to shoot down the planes, and sink the ships of any anti-communist Chinese who attempt to interfere with the slaughter of American boys in Korea. Impossible, you say, yes. Incredible, you say, yes. Unbelievable, yes. But it's all a matter of cold record. And let me quote, if I may, a great American as to the effect of that treasonable order. Let me quote Ambassador Bill Bullock, testifying on April 8, 1952. Listen to this again, if you will, and for the benefit of the press, page number 7578. Ambassador Bullitt was being asked about the effect of this order. He was being asked about why the Chinese Navy didn't destroy the communist shipping. Listen to this. He says, oh yes, the Chinese have a very efficient force, referring to our friends, of course. He said, although it is forbidden to act in any way by orders of the United States government, the United States government has given orders to our 7th Fleet, listen to this if you will, to our 7th Fleet to prevent it from stopping the communist supply ships going to Korea. Still quoting Bullitt. He says those communist ships sail right past the Chinese Navy. They are equipped with Soviet munitions, put in the Polish ships in Gdynia. They come all the way around and go right by Formosa and sail past there, taking those munitions up, taking those weapons up to be used to kill American soldiers in Korea. Still quoting Bullitt. He says, by order of our government, the Chinese Navy is flatly forbidden to sink those communist ships. Ladies and gentlemen, why on earth does our State Department insist that the sons of American mothers must protect and guard the weapons being shipped to kill the sons of other American mothers? Well, the 155 million American people can decide whether you want more of this. If you do, you can just go right ahead and vote the Democrat ticket. But if, as I am sure, the Americans, both Democrats and Republicans alike, are sick way down deep inside at the dishonesty, the corruption, the sellout of America, the sellout in every corner of the world, then I suggest that you give us, the Republicans, a chance to do the job which the Democrats have so miserably failed to do over the past 20 years. And I want to make, this afternoon, I'd like to make one solemn promise to the millions of Americans in our radio and television audience. And that promise is this: put the Republicans in power this fall, and I promise you we won't be in any wars that we're afraid to win. The job of every Republican this dark year of 1952 is to take the facts to the American people. We needn't try to argue or persuade them. Our task is merely to give the American people the straight, unvarnished truth. Do that and we don't have to worry. If the American people have the facts, then November 4th will be one of the greatest days America has seen in decades. Robert Vogler returned to this country a short time ago after 18 months in a communist prison cell. 18 months of being tortured because he dared to be a loyal American. Now, he has been carrying on an apparently hopeless battle, an almost hopeless battle to induce this administration to do something about the other 5,000, I repeat the figure, 5,000 Americans who, as of this moment, are rotting in communist prison cells throughout Russia and her satellite nations. Well, Bob Vogler is here in this convention hall this afternoon. He is here in this convention hall and not being tortured in a communist prison cell thanks to a courageous wife who refused to let the State Department forget him. If you want to get more of that story, ask Bob Vogler. Bob, will you stand up? Mrs. Vogler, will you stand up? Bob Vogler and Mrs. Vogler. But Mr. Truman says there's nothing wrong in the State Department. He says, oh, everything is just fine. You recall Truman actually said, if anyone hears of anything wrong, he said, get on the telephone. And he said, call me collect. And he said, I, Harry Truman, will personally take care of things. Oh, Mr. Truman, your telephone is ringing today. Your telephone is ringing today, Mr. Truman. 5,000 Americans are calling. They're calling from prison cells deep inside Russia and our satellite nations. They are homesick, Mr. Truman. They are lonely and maybe a little afraid. Answer your telephone, Mr. Truman. It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. Some of them haven't heard an American speak for years. But, Mr. Truman, they're getting a busy signal on your telephone. Well, they'll call Washington again. They'll call Washington again when the American people are through with you, Mr. Truman, and through with the Atchisons, the Jessups, and the Latimores. And I say to Bob Vogler and his courageous wife and to those 5,000 Americans that when we, the Republican Party, take over, we promise that the telephone line won't be busy to those 5,000 people any longer. Why must we, thank you, why must we, the American people, be forced to cringe in the face of communism? What has happened to our courage, our determination, and our intelligence? This is not what America wants. The American people are not soft. They're not afraid. What we need in Washington is someone to express the resolute determination of the people of the United States to back down no further, to fight back with the weight of skill, the intelligence, the courage, and the truth which is ours. We can as a country no longer stand idle as the mimics of the Moscow party line sell us short. The days of dilettante diplomacy are running out. Sugared phrases may be fine for Washington tea parties, but this is not a tea party we're in today. Let's put some men with grassroots common sense in charge of the government, and then watch America go, my friends. It is peace we want, and peace we can have, but peace with courage and peace with honor. And that is what the Republican Party promises the American people. There was a time when the United States could sit with honor in the Council of Nations. Today she must cast down her eyes in shame for the sons she has betrayed, for the allies we have betrayed: Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, the Baltic states, Korea, China. And fellow Americans, if our civilization is to live, this groveling and indecision on the part of this great nation must stop. This groveling and indecision will stop come January 1st, 1953. Over the past 5 years, as I have witnessed the complete moral decay of the leadership of what should be the greatest nation on earth, I have been often carried back to one early morning in the Pacific on the island of Bougainville. And I've told this story often to my good friends from Wisconsin. I'd like to repeat it to you here today, if I may. And carried back that early morning, I had been in a Marine dive-bombing squadron then. I guess Truman would call that a policeman's squadron. we had been leapfrogging northward through the Pacific Islands to bring the strong Jap base at Rabaul within dive and torpedo bombing range. We finally got bases in Bougainville, and I recall this first morning before our first strike, we were all gathered in a ready tent, not much larger than this platform. After the briefing had been completed, after each section, each division, each squadron were told where they had to go, what they were to do, my commanding officer said to the chaplain, he said, "Chaplain, we know that a lot of these young men are going to die today." And he said, "I thought you might have a few words to say to them." The chaplain got up and he said, "Yes, Major, I have a few words, a very few words." That chaplain was killed incidentally later. His remains, as of today, are on the floor of the Pacific somewhere off Buka Passage. Here's what he said. Here's what that chaplain said. He said, "If you young men, regardless of whether you're killed in the next 6 hours or whether you live for 60 years, he said, if you will remember two fundamental truths taught by every religious group, by every religious sect since the beginning of time. He said, if you will remember, number one, that there is a God who is eternal, and number two, that each of you has a soul that is immortal. He said, then you'll do an outstanding job, not only for yourself, but also for your country, regardless of whether it's for 6 hours or 60 years. And ladies and gentlemen, I've often thought, over the past 5 years, as I witnessed our steady, deliberate retreat from victory, from the victory that those young men purchased with their blood, I think that if only those of us whom you, the American people, have given the highest jobs this nation has to offer, if only we Democrats and Republicans alike could always keep in mind the words spoken by that chaplain who is about to die, to those young men who are about to die, then the 155 million American people could hope that even at this late date, even though the sands in the hourglass of time are rapidly running out, you, the American people, could hope that we would get together, that America's two great parties would get together, and both join in this fight and do the job which still can be done, namely the creation of a decent, peaceful world in which the rights of all men would be safe. And I thank you.
That was the speech of Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, a speech similar to those he has made elsewhere around the country.
Tell him.
And similar to addresses he has made to Congress and in congressional committees. It was a performance we in Washington have seen several times before when he presented documents to prove what he calls his facts on the communist infiltration of our government. He called for a Republican campaign this year against that part of the administration performance over the last few years. Grant Holcomb is down there on the floor of the convention during this demonstration for McCarthy. Let's switch now to Grant Holcomb.
Down here on the floor, we're right in the middle of a demonstration that seems to be forming. This, of course, will be the second demonstration of the convention. The first one took place last night. Senator McCarthy has just finished his speech, one of the first speeches that I would say was directed directly at television. You probably notice he had a couple of visual gags, as we call them. He had the three little fishes, Atchison, Hiss, and Lattimore, a reference to his speech. And when he made that reference to them, as you saw, some people jumped up down in front of the platform and walked across with the little fishes, Hiss, Atchison, and Lattimore. And then in another dramatic moment of Mr. McCarthy's speech, he pointed to the back of the hall to Robert Vogler and his wife as they... During McCarthy's speech, there was a tremendous amount of excitement here, not only for the oratory of Mr. McCarthy, but for some of the byplay that was going on down here at the floor. If you look right in front of me, you'll see that Pennsylvania delegation. It's empty. They just walked out of the hall just towards the end of his speech. Some of them are there now, and they're going out into a... Doug Edwards, a few moments ago, the Pennsylvania delegation is going to vote on who their choices are for candidate. During the speech, Governor Fine walked in of Pennsylvania and Senator Duff. And so there's going to be a dramatic meeting in the back of this hall in just a few moments. Well, that's about all there is from down here on the floor, so let's switch back up to Walter Cronkite in the control studio A.
That was Grant Holcomb down on the floor of the International Amphitheater here in this demonstration that followed a speech by Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin. We have heard some word from the Credentials Committee, and we're going to give that to you in just a moment and switch back there probably, but first a word from Betty Furness.
Don't the kids dirty lots of things in summer? Play clothes, slacks, corduroys, and beach towels. If you've been lugging all that heavy wash out to a clothesline, you've really been working. What you need is a Westinghouse clothes dryer. It saves you so much work and time. It sits right beside your washer, and with no effort, you just pop the clothes right from the laundromat right into your dryer like that. Then you set the dry dial. Set it for damp for things that you want to iron, and your Westinghouse dryer will shut off automatically when your clothes are just right for ironing. Set it for dry, and they'll come out just dry enough for storage. You'll even save ironing time because many things don't need ironing when you dry them in a Westinghouse clothes dryer. Yes, there's no doubt about it. Clotheslines are really for the birds. What you need is a Westinghouse clothes dryer. So get on the bandwagon. Go to your Westinghouse dealer now and tell him Betty Furness said he'd give you a good deal on a Westinghouse clothes dryer. Remember, you can be sure if it's Westinghouse.
Well, we've had another stirring speech on the floor of the Republican National Convention. At least it seemed to stir the Republican delegates here, the 1,206 of them, their 1,206 alternates, and their guests. It was the speech of Senator Joseph McCarthy. That you just heard. McCarthy has been the leader of the fight against communism in government, as he calls it, and today he addressed the Republican National Convention. He got a 3.5-minute ovation when he began his speech and another 3-minute ovation when he concluded it. He was interrupted several times, as you noticed, for brief bursts of applause, and he did introduce Robert Vogler and his wife. Vogler was the telephone company executive who was jailed